This is Real Republican News, and I am your host, Jason Mariner, and I have with me today Representative Rick Roth, and he is a real Republican.
Good afternoon, Jason.
How are you, Rick?
It's a wonderful day in paradise.
All right, so what do you have for us?
Well, I am actually a constitutional conservative. I've been telling people for 4 years that I am a representative, not a politician, because I focus on policy. And for 4 years, I've been running this bill to protect our Constitution. And what I figured out is this is the year to pass this amendment and get it on the ballot so Floridians can vote to raise the bar so it takes a supermajority of voters to change our Constitution. Because on the national scene and in Florida, our constitutions are under attack. There are people that want to change our Constitution and change our laws so they can be in power forever.
Forever. I couldn't agree with him more. As we've been talking on and on this show about, is our constitutional rights as Americans are under attack. I don't think there's any simpler way you can put it. So essentially what Rick wants to do here is protect us Floridians from, the technical tyrants and the people in Washington that want to basically strip you and your fellow Floridians of their constitutional rights. And Rick has a great plan on how to change that from happening.
In order for us to make this possible, we have to do two things. We first have to pass this in the state legislature, and I think this is the year that Republicans will stand up and vote this amendment onto the ballot. But the second thing we have to do is we have to get a petition going and get people that are watching to sign this petition as a Florida voter that they want to protect our Constitution. Because we have to build the momentum, because this is going to take some money to get this passed.
Absolutely.
But the bottom line is, now is the right time.
Well, now is the right time, and as we've also discussed on this show, this is the time where you, the American people, or the people of Florida, we should say for this purpose, need to start getting involved in your own lives and in Florida politics, because this is our constitutional duty, and it's also our right, as we've talked about before. When we see a problem, we need to stand up and tell our government that there needs to be change that needs to happen. Otherwise, once they start taking constitutional rights, they're not stopping at one or two. They're going to take them all.
That's exactly right.
What do you think about
So one of the things that's very important for everybody to understand is that you as a Florida voter have power, but you only have power if you, by voting and also by talking to your fellow Floridians and making sure that people understand what they're voting on when they go to the polls. So let me explain my constitutional amendment like this. I'm going to give you two examples of why we need to raise the bar. Currently, it takes 60% plus one of voters when we vote on an amendment in November 3rd, we voted on amendments. It takes 60% plus one to get it passed and goes into the Constitution. So what this amendment does is raise the bar to a supermajority, which is 66 2/3. So I have two examples. Both of these are constitutional amendments that were passed in 2018. The first one, we all are remembering Amendment 4, restoration of felon voting rights.
And by the way, before you go any further, Rick, as everyone knows out there, I didn't exactly behave myself all of my life, and I was one of those people that had to have his constitutional rights restored, and my right to vote was one of them. It's a constitutional right. Now, there was a little bit of a problem with the way they passed the law. It was ambiguous. People couldn't understand it, and they left room for a loophole. And we've mentioned this on the show before. If you're in a courtroom and there's a loophole, that's usually euphemistic for a way for the bad guy to get away with something. That's what a loophole essentially means.
So what they do when they put these constitutional amendments on the ballot is they argue their position before a court to get it on the ballot, and then they purposely leave it vague to get the maximum number of votes. So what the constitutional amendment said was In order to have your felon voting rights restored, you had to complete all terms of your sentence. And it also excluded people that were murderers or had committed sex crimes. But they left out one key word, which you mentioned a minute ago, restitution. So restitution is a key component of the all terms of the sentence. They argued with the Supreme Court that it was about restitution, but they purposely left the word off the ballot. That's purposely vague, and I'm making the argument that that's why the constitutional amendment process can be dangerous, because they're purposely vague and they can fool the Floridians who are voting for them and makes it difficult. When I go to Tallahassee to pass laws, the more specific the law is that I write, the bill, the more specific the bill is, purposely defining exactly what the changes are and who it's going to affect. That's how you get legislation passed in Tallahassee, is by being specific. Our constitutional amendment process is flawed because it's the opposite.
Absolutely. And I've got to tell you this. From someone that speaks from experience, when you do something wrong, there's a process that needs to be gone through. You have to first serve your sentence. And number two, you have to make things right with whoever you harmed or whatever you stole, meaning pay restitution. That's a big part of anybody's sentence. And it's usually the last thing that a convicted felon wants to do. They don't want to have to give back money and really make things right. And that's part of making things really right, is by paying back society for the debt that you've incurred. It costs money to go through incarceration. It costs money to be in front of a court. And those are taxpayers' dollars, by the way. So in order to become fully square with the House, you really have to pay people back to get this stuff done.
Exactly right.
You know, correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm just speaking from my own perspective. My perception is that this was intentionally left out in order to increase the number of convicted felons that are allowed to vote, that don't necessarily make things right or square with the House, so to speak, in order to increase that Democratic voting base.
That's exactly right. And the second example was also passed into the Constitution in 2018, and we call it supermajority to raise taxes. My argument is very simply this. This Constitution in the state of Florida is under attack, and there are people that are trying to change the way our government functions. Remember, the purpose of the Florida Constitution is to say exactly how government will react and interact with its citizens. The Constitution protects you from your government by specifying what powers the government has. And so what I'm saying is we need a supermajority of voters to change the way our government acts through this constitutional process. The process is a process that's necessary, but it needs a supermajority. So the example I'm giving you now is the amendment that was passed in 2018 called supermajority to raise taxes. What did the voters agree to? They agreed to put this in the Constitution that me as a state representative, it takes 2/3 votes of state representatives and 2/3 votes of state senators to raise your taxes. To raise taxes in the state of Florida, it takes a supermajority vote. The Florida voters spoke clearly that they wanted it to be more difficult to raise taxes. And that's exactly the argument I'm using for raising the bar to supermajority. We want it to be a little more difficult because we don't want to infringe on your rights by changing the Constitution unless we do it by a supermajority.
And let's just be clear here. If anyone's wondering, because let me break this down for you. We don't want our taxes raised. I don't think there's anybody out there who says, hey, let me pay more taxes to the government every year, right?
Right, exactly.
That's a fair point to make. Okay, so when we introduce more descriptive and understandable legislature, right? It's less of a means for them to cheat, so to speak, and to put fluff into it. We just saw this done with the COVID-19 relief bill, for instance. A ton of money was sent overseas for absolutely no reason. We sent, I think, $300 million to the Caribbean to count how many fish were in the water. To me, that was an absolutely ridiculous thing to do in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. I don't know who put that in there. I don't know why it was put in there. All I know is that it was just a political stunt that was pulled at the expense of the American taxpayer. It makes things more expensive for you, and it makes things less beneficial for you. This is why we haven't seen our COVID-19 relief, when all our politicians are really doing is arguing and bickering over what they want and executing their pet projects.
One of the things that's real important for people to understand is in these very complicated, long bills that are trying to be passed through Congress, that there's always going to be a certain amount of politics where you're actually putting additional stuff in the bill in order to bribe someone to get their vote. And that's what's dangerous, is we actually have a philosophy by a lot of politicians that it's okay to spend money like it's water. We've already spent $6 trillion on COVID-19, and now we're talking about another $1.9 trillion. And that's why I'm saying now is the time to protect the Florida Constitution, because people also know that one way to destroy the America that we know and that we grew up with is to break the bank, is to overspend ourselves into debt where we are no longer able to pay our bills and take care of our citizens.
And that puts you, the American taxpayer, into a position where you're dependent upon the government. And that, make no mistake about it, is exactly what the left wants. They want the American people to be dependent upon them, because if you're dependent upon them, guess what? You have to do what they say they want.
And they're doing it to get your vote. They want
Absolutely.
you to say, oh, I want more stuff because I'm not making enough money because the government has restricted my ability to make money. Now I need more help from the government, so I'm going to vote for more stuff from the government. Oh, it's okay to raise taxes because I know I'm going to get more stuff.
Absolutely. And we're seeing it real time every single day right now as we speak. They want to make things more expensive. They want to hike up taxes, making you more dependent upon the government and increase their voter base so they maintain power and control forever and ever. And that is not how America works. America, correct me if I'm wrong, is supposed to be a two-party system.
Exactly right. One of the things that people need to think about is why do some people think that America is special and why do some people not? I think America is special, and it was first coined in 1892 that we were exceptional because we don't have the normal fights between parties and we don't have the normal fights between labor and capital like they have in Europe. Unfortunately, we have people in America today that want America to be more like Europe, and that is something that is so scary because the European Union and those countries are failing miserably.
Well,
America's doing so much better, even in COVID-19, than those countries.
We just saw it with Brexit. All right, the EU is breaking apart. They're in tatters. It's not working. And let me remind you of this. That was one of the first reasons we got away from Europe in the first place. This used to not be America, in case you don't know your history. This used to be a country or a territory that was controlled by England. We said we didn't like it anymore. We didn't want to continue to pay taxes for no reason. We broke away. We didn't like taxation without representation. People said enough's enough, and we created America. America is what has made us prosper. The Constitution is what has enabled us to pursue life, liberty, and happiness, and we see it being stripped away from us every single day, and it's getting worse and worse.
And that's actually the goal. The goal is to do away with our Constitution so that the government can do whatever it wants to do. It can run over minorities. People need to remember what the Constitution does. It protects the minorities' interests. Even though you have the House of Representatives in Washington controlled by Democrats, you have the Senate marginally controlled by Democrats, you have the president is also a Democrat, But under our Constitution, we still have minority rights, and congressmen and senators can still fight for their minority interests and those that they represent. If you change the Constitution, then you'll have it ruled by majority rule, and you'll just run over the people you don't like.
Well, and what they're clearly trying to do is create a one-party system where they, again, get to hang on to power and tell you, the American people, what to do forever and ever, and that's just the way that they want it to be. Like we've been talking about, you have to say what they want you to say right now. You have to believe what they want you to believe. Otherwise, you're going to be deplatformed. You're going to be punished. You're going to be silenced. Luckily, we live in a state where we have a governor that's saying, look, this stuff is not okay. There's clear evidence of this. Why do you think so many people are flocking to Florida from places like New York with oppressive policies? I mean, you can't deny this stuff anymore. People are flocking out of New York because of dictator-type rulers like Andrew Cuomo, who are doing the wrong thing for the people, and they're moving to Florida. One thing that I must ask, when you move down here from New York, you're more than welcome to. In fact, we'd love to have you. Just please remember where you came from. Remember what Florida is about.
And remember why you left.
Remember why you left. And don't turn us purple, please. We want this to be a red state. That's the whole entire reason you're moving here in the first place, is because Florida is a great place. We follow the Constitution. We do things the right way.
We have more freedoms because we pay less taxes. You have more opportunity. You have two choices. You can either have bigger government and less freedom, or less government that's held accountable, that can be more efficient and spend less money. Do you realize Florida a couple of years ago became the third largest state?
I do.
We took over, we outpaced New York. So we have slightly more citizens in Florida and New York, but our budget in Florida is $92 billion. New York's is $180 billion. So when you move from New York, remember you're escaping from New York to a state that has lower taxes. You need to vote for people, you need to vote for people like me that are going to lower your taxes and give you more opportunity.
And by the way, Rick's just a little bit older than me, but I remember when I was a kid, my grandparents lived in Florida, and I always asked my parents, why can't we move to Florida? And there were less jobs in Florida. Over the past 25 years, that's drastically changed. Industry in Florida is now booming because things are done the right way in Florida. We don't take no for an answer. Our politicians protect the people. Our politicians, for the most part, serve the people here in Florida, which is, again, why we're seeing...
Hey, don't call me a politician. I'm a
I'm
representative.
You. We're talking about politicians that protect Floridians, but we're also talking about men like Rick who want to see your best interests played out in the state of Florida. There's people in Washington, all they want to do is corrupt the way things are done in Florida. Our governor's already been asked to shut things down. He said no, it doesn't work. People need to remain free and sovereign, and that's exactly what we have.
You know what's really funny? It's so ironic that we have control now in Washington, D.C. by a party that is saying one thing and doing the opposite. They say they're for Black Lives Matter, but everything they're doing is actually hurting those minority groups. Defunding the police, there's no worse way to protect people's rights than to not protect their personal property. My point is this, is whether you like our past president or not, he did one thing that changed American politics forever. He actually was promises made, promises kept. That's what we as Floridians, and that's what we as Americans have to demand, is that our elected representatives do what they say. My goal is always to do no harm to the state of Florida. If a bill's going to pass that I sponsored and it's going the wrong way, I will kill it myself, because it's more important to do no harm, because if it's good legislation, we can pass it next year.
This is exactly why we are using the term real Republicans. Real Republicans believe in doing the right thing. We believe in God, family, country. We believe in helping one another out. This is why I have always said, if I ever say anything incorrect on this channel and you're able to fact check me, I will happily recant whatever I say, because my only intention is to tell the truth and to help this country, and especially the state, get back on track. Things need to improve. Correct me if I'm wrong.
The way to improve America, in my humble opinion, is for the silent moral majority to get involved. It is apathy and no concern for politics that is destroying our republic. I knocked on a door 2 years ago on a Sunday afternoon running for re-election, and the gentleman told me I had 1 minute. You know what he said? I said, why only 1 minute? He said, the Patriots on TV. In other words, NFL football 2 years ago was more important to him than what was going on in the world of politics. I dare tell you, I think that mood is starting to change, that people are actually paying attention. That's why you had such an overwhelming number of people vote, is because people are starting to pay attention, and that is good news. If we get out the vote in 2022, after we fix voter integrity and making sure that the way we vote can be verified, I think we should be signing on absentee ballots. We should sign our name on the outside of the envelope, but we should also sign our name on the actual ballot.
Yeah, absolutely.
So your name cannot be separated from that ballot, and you can always come back and prove whether or not you actually are legal voter.
And just to kind of back up what Rick was just saying, I was one of those people 4, 5, 6 years ago. I started to see a problem with what was going on, and that's what precipitated me to get involved. I always liked history. I always liked the Constitution and how our founding fathers did things. They recognized that there were certain inalienable rights, God-given to each American, that we're all entitled to. We're watching them slowly being stripped away, and this is why people are starting to wake up.
I don't know if it's slowly anymore.
Well, it's happening at an alarmingly quick rate through executive order after executive order. And look, the bottom line here is they want to deepen the pockets of Silicon Valley. They want to keep grabbing power, and they have one primary goal, and that's to make sure that they remain in power forever and ever. And it's up to you, it's up to me, it's up to Rick, it's up to regular people, American patriots. You can't sit there and call yourself a patriot if you're not willing to get up and be the loud majority. We can't be the silent majority anymore. We have to be the majority that will not leave them alone, that will not accept defeat, that will not accept anything but constitutional adherence.
I'd like to finish with this thought. I believe the party in power in Washington, D.C. now is more focused on their reputation and their appearance of what they're doing. That's why they did all the executive orders on Inauguration Day, was to satisfy their voters and satisfy their donors. That party is focusing mostly on the politics of trying to get things done. I loved what President Trump did. He ignored the political landmines by taking on almost everybody that was doing wrong.
I think he took on everybody.
He even took on Big Pharma as he was trying to lower your prescription drug price, and that probably bit him pretty hard. But the point is, you need to be voting for people that will do the right thing, whether or not they get reelected. Not to get reelected. Vote for people that are trying to do the right thing, regardless if they get reelected. So another thing that people need to think about is term limits for U.S. Congress.
Absolutely.
When you do term limits for U.S. Congress, and by the way, I have a recommendation. 8 years in Tallahassee as a representative is a tight window. I hate to tell you, Jason, it took me 3 years to really get good at this.
I think 12 years.
So 8 years in the state legislature is fine, because it's 8 years for the governor, 8 years for the president. But Congress is a body of seniority, so I'm recommending 12 years. 12 years for U.S. reps and 18 years for U.S. senators. But think about what that will do. That will give incoming new congressmen more power
Absolutely.
and more credibility and more ability to work on their agenda. Because I'm in the state house that is term limited for 8 years, I have an 8-year plan to get legislation passed that I want to pass. And that's what every representative, that's what every congressman needs to be doing, is passing their own legislation. And when you give them a term limit, they have a plan.
And my recommendation to you is that you get involved in your own lives, you get involved in your country, you get involved in your freedom, and you vote for guys like this. Because guys like this are going to get you your rights secured, and they're going to get you your rights back, the ones that have been taken from you. What do you think about that, Rick?
Very good.
This has been an episode of Real Republican News, and again, I'm your host, Jason Mariner. This has been Republican Representative, let me back that up, Real Republican Representative Rick Roth. My name is Jason Mariner, and until next time, which there will be one, no matter how much censorship comes into play, I say God bless you, your families, those around you, and watch over the Constitution of the United States. Be well, everyone.